Nick, I was going to open with a joke.
I laughed before you gave the joke, so it must be a very funny one, and I'm sensing what you're about to put down.
I don't have one. I'm
Well-
just sitting here as the joke.
Maybe, exactly, you could be my humorous start to the day.
There you go. See, I didn't even need to say any cheesy thing from the internet to get you to giggle.
You did not. You regularly get me to giggle with no planning or thought. It just happens.
Welcome to the Tradies in Business podcast with your hosts Warwick Bidwell and Nicole Cox. Divert your phone and grab a brew as Waz and Nick unpack tips, tales, secrets and stuff-ups from guests both inside and outside your trade, helping educate and inspire you to break the cycle of gut-busting and money stress and create a true trade business.
G'day listeners, welcome to the show. This is Tradies in Business. Just in case you thought you were listening to something much more entertaining. I shouldn't have such a low opinion of myself, should I, Nicole?
No, you should not. We get regular feedback that people love our podcast, so no, you're not allowed to do that anymore. No more disparaging comments.
I won't do that anymore.
There might be a little Chucky Norris in there. I've left it for you. I've laid it down.
It's fascinating. You and I, as well as doing the whole Tradiepreneur program, which is business education, motivation, inspiration, accountability, all that sort of stuff, all that cool business coachy stuff that I know you have learned to embrace in recent years as a business coach, Nicole, haven't you?
I make a great mentor.
We also do some personal mentoring for business leaders, managers, those sorts of people. And sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between the two. But one of the concepts out of personally mentoring people is the way we talk about ourselves. And I'm a shocker for putting myself down and doubting the value of some of the work that I do, whether that's renovating my mum's cottage or creating a podcast or teaching someone how to be a better leader in their business. And we often talk to people about they wouldn't let someone else talk about them in that way and say those things and, you know, I guess criticize and disparage them. So why would you do it to yourself? And my little very cryptic Chucky Norris is to come all the way back to people saying bad things about other people in the industry, largely for their own self-promotion, I guess, and self-gain.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen a few examples of this in recent months, and we noticed one recently that you had a little Karen moment about with me one evening via Messenger.
I did get a little Karen-y. I was pretty cranky.
But it's a problem that I think all of you listening to this podcast should just pause and reflect on. It's easy to listen to podcast episodes and kind of nod along and go, oh yeah, and we sort of listen a little bit detached from the content. Mm-hmm. And I know lots of you out there listening to us right now do apply a lot of our content, a lot of what Nick and I discuss and teach to your own lives and to your own businesses. And we love hearing feedback from you to that effect because it lets us know that our message is getting through to some people, which is that's our purpose here, is to get some messages through to poke you in the brain box or poke you in the chest and get you to think a little differently, feel a little differently, so that you can make some better choices and, you know, create healthy businesses, healthy families, and healthy lives. And yet, I think a lot of times we listen to things without really listening. And so when Nick and I launch into what we're going to launch into today and talk about other people, you know, it's the they in inverted commas. Those of you watching the video would have just seen that, and those of you listening to the podcast will wonder where the video is. But they say things about other industries. We've talked before about the negative comments that are made about builders. And we can insert any trade name in there of the negative things that are said about other trades, about unions, about government, about apprentices, about women, about suppliers, about sales reps. And there's all these groups or generalizations made, and it really shits me when business people do that to promote themselves. They push other people down to elevate themselves, and I find that quite distasteful. But listeners, listen, with your listeners, you do this every day, either to yourself, I guarantee it, and just reflect on this. You're either doing it to yourself, you're doing it even if it's just in your head about other people, other groups, in order to make yourself feel better. Just stop and think about that for a moment. And tell me that you don't ever do that. I do. Coxie, do you?
Yes, I do. And I think it can be as simple as the standard you walk past. It's like so many other things that we talk about here on the podcast. When you observe this out there in the world and you walk past it, or you ignore it, or you don't call somebody on their poor behaviour, you're actually contributing to that negative conversation that continues to happen, particularly about trades, which is what gets us all fired up here at Tradies in Business, is that, you know, in this case, what we saw didn't actually even come from a consumer, which we see time and time again, horrible negative conversations about tradies in general from consumers. This time it was from somebody within the industry, playing into a fear for consumers for their own benefit, which was dreadfully sad and absolutely infuriating at 8:30 sitting on the lounge scrolling Facebook. And so sometimes they need to be called on. I think that, you know, we all walk past many of these things because it just seems too hard. And we are then therefore contributing to those negative conversations. We can put a stop to it, or say, that hasn't been my experience, or please can you explain where you've driven this outcome from? How did that happen? Because often we're talking just about a minority. As always, there's always a minority that don't do business well. There's always a minority who make a mistake on a job. There's always a minority that don't get back to the consumer, and that allows everybody then to play into that fear, and we can make sweeping blanket statements about how terrible builders are, how terrible tradies are. They're all going to send you broke. They're there to rip you off. They're not there to do a good, genuine, hardworking job. And we play into that conversation every day by not calling people when they have that conversation going on online, in person, wherever it might be, by just standing up for our industry. I think it's an opportunity for us all to point out, well, actually, you may have had one bad experience. I understand that would have been really uncomfortable. But how many times have you actually used tradies and it worked out okay?
Because it applies to everybody. And I did a bit of reading on this years ago, and someone quoted something to me that points to this whole issue with humans. And it actually comes from the Bible, and I'm not going to deliver a sermon or anything, listeners. But it's fascinating because it goes back to whether you believe in God or the Bible or not, it doesn't really matter, because the saying, like all of our other cliches and sayings and axioms and coaching points and all that other stuff, is part of human history. And I'm going to read it out here so I get it right. It says, first remove the log out of your own eye, and then you can see clearly to remove the speck out of your brother's eye. And when I believe when the Bible talks about brother, it means your fellow man, your fellow human, right? Your fellow person. And so I just love, it's like, take the log out of your eye before you start looking at the speck in someone else's eye. And often when we see people casting aspersions on others and making disparaging comments and being uber critical of other trades or particular sectors or types of people, they've got a log stuck in their own eye. And they can't see past their own faults and flaws.
I'd like to put a few logs in on
to realise that none of us are perfect. And that's really the point of that whole thing. None of us are perfect.
You don't become a better person by putting somebody else down. You don't become a better expert in your field by playing into
showing
the fear.
How dumb other people are.
Exactly. You just,
if I can just use plain language.
Oh, you just don't. It doesn't make you a better person by saying how others get wrong and I've got a solution to make it better for you. That doesn't make you a better person. It doesn't make you a great leader. It doesn't make you an expert at what you do. All it does is play into fear. May I suggest it invites people that feel that fear, that probably aren't the right clients, no doubt are not, who all walk around in fear rather than embracing. There might be another way to look at these things. We spoke with a fantastic client who's a good friend of ours yesterday about how many other doors there are out there to open. You don't have to buy into the narrative that the media play out, or some of these professionals or past clients that have had some trouble might play into. We don't have to play to that narrative. We can create our own. We can be comfortable with where we're at. We can be okay with what our fellow man is doing. It doesn't threaten us. It doesn't mean that I am better or worse. Again, it's the same. We're all the same. We're all trying our best. Some of us might not get it right. And there's an opportunity to help and support that person rather than stand on your soapbox and put them down.
I feel like it's laziness in some regards to do that, to take the path of focusing on the speck in someone else's eye. Because the hard work is, as you've referenced, Coxie, good friend and client of ours yesterday, has chosen to do the hard work. And it's been somewhat painful for that person because they have actually had a lifetime of focusing on others, not so much tearing others down, but trying to be something to please others based on that same principle that others are focused on his faults and flaws. And so, he has put a lot of effort into trying to correct his own faults and flaws in order to fit in, please, attract, appease others, and has worked out in his middle ages that that's not a very successful long-term strategy for happiness and fulfillment in life. And many of you listening to this might be going, yeah, well, I figured that out years ago. And for some of you, that might be a revelation. That really we are who we are. And I think that whole putting others down is often coming from people who aren't okay with themselves. They're not comfortable or confident or satisfied with what they see in the mirror. And there's a number of ways we can approach that gap in ourselves. We can do the hard work and the noble work and look to fill our own gaps. Get out the spack filler and the blade, the plasterer's knife, and start filling up the cracks, and doing that through our own, I guess, daily habits and all the other things we talk about here on the podcast. Just being a better human. What does it mean to be a better human, or a better parent, or a better employer, or a better apprentice? What does that look like? And actually go after that work. Or we can take the lazy man's route and go and tell other people that they've got cracks that need filling, and take the focus away from our own inadequacies and our own fear about ourselves.
I think you've nailed it there with the fear. So much of this is around fear and a lack of confidence. And I think that, if I was really brave and confident in my own product or what I do, regardless of what I do, I wouldn't need to be worried about what others are doing. And I wouldn't need to speak negatively around maybe their inadequacies in some areas, because we're all on a journey and we all learn at different times within our lives when we're open to it, or the right people come into our life, or the right lesson lands when I'm ready to hear it. And because my growth is on this path, it doesn't mean that somebody else's path is going to be the same. And so I think we can go a long way forward here as a race by being understanding and helpful to those around us. If I see somebody else who is having a struggle or a problem within their business, why can't I just help them? Why do I actually have to pull them down? Why can't I just be positive and encouraging? And maybe share a podcast or share a learning that I've had within my business journey, rather than talking down to them or talking down about them, worse still. Why couldn't I just be positive and encouraging and wholesome around my thoughts with that person, rather than leaning into that fear because of my own lack of confidence and sharing, I guess, those disparaging comments about a sector to improve my own self-worth, because it's a very shallow self-worth if that's what I'm basing it on. It's
Yeah.
it's a complex issue, and it saddens me to see that many of the people that we have noticed in the last small period of time, last month or so, that have been doing this, and I think it's getting worse, I really do, are on such a negative journey. And yet all I can do, again, even though I might like to slap them around and tell them they're doing the wrong thing and this isn't
Point out their
okay.
flaws.
Yes. Is maybe to share some positivity around that and allow them the opportunity to see that it doesn't need to be that way. Might actually be positive. There may be a positive road here we can take.
It's easy to drift into self-righteousness sitting here on our microphones, pointing out the specks in others' eyes, and I want you to hear this episode, listeners, as a challenge being laid down, at least from me, to all of you to be a part of a different way of approaching this. I think observing others' behaviour and noting that, ooh, that's a bit off. I don't think that's very positive. And that's, I guess that's what Coxie and I have just laid out on the table here is, hey, check this out. We don't feel like this is a great way to live. What if we all did this? And I feel like that's what you were just speaking to, Coxie, is recognise an unfavourable, undesirable, unhelpful behaviour. I don't think that is being critical of them. You won't find us going online attacking other industries or attacking fellow coaches or training businesses or anything. We have our opinions and they're ours. And they're not for hanging on the neighbour's washing line so everyone can see them. And we all have a choice about how we respond or react to situations in any moment. So for you listening to this, if you're a trade business owner or a trade business supporter, this is like someone sends you a text message at 9:47 on a Friday morning, one of your team, to say, oh, really sorry, I won't be in today. And our immediate response, as I would, is to probably be pissed off. It's like, you couldn't have told me at 6 o'clock this morning? Surely you would have known at 5 o'clock yesterday that you were feeling crook, probably been on the gas overnight and hungover, or just wants to have a long weekend and rah, 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 rah. That's our immediate reaction. And that's what I would term a reaction versus choosing a response of, okay, this is super inconvenient and I'm feeling feelings of stress and frustration and anger right now, and I'm going to choose to approach this a different way. And maybe on Monday at the team meeting, we need to have a conversation about our values and perhaps even look at ourselves as the employer and go, okay, well, what have I done? What's the culture I've created that has actually led to this person, quote unquote, disrespecting me and treating me this way? Because as Coxie said earlier in this episode, I think you did, we teach people how to treat us. And maybe you didn't say it in this episode, but you've said it 100 times this week in coaching sessions, is we teach people how to treat us. So that employee is treating us the way we've taught them to. And it sucks to remove the log from our own eye because, man, that's hurty stuff.
It's really painful, right, to understand that in one way or another you've contributed to what has happened. It's a big concept. I understand that people really struggle with this one. It took me a long time to really accept this in my own life. And I've created everything within my life, whether it be things that happen to me that would be easy to have a perception to say it's somebody else's fault or I had nothing to do with it. I've still invited that person into my life, or I've still committed to living a certain way that means that things can, I'm open to certain experiences or things happening. So I'm still responsible for that. And likewise with our team, I'm responsible if my team member calls me at 9:47 and says I'm not coming in. I haven't obviously given them the pathway and shown them how it is that they need to let me know they're having a day off today because they're not well. I obviously haven't let them know. So it's got to be me. And it's a hard concept. And I think it all goes back. It's all the same circle. When we remove ourselves, these things aren't actually happening to me. They're happening around us. They are situations in which we can remove some of that emotion and look at it almost like you're looking over at somebody else's situation. And it's amazing how differently you can approach that conversation. It's amazing how differently you approach those situations when you remove your feelings from where you're at right then and there. Doesn't mean that you can't have feelings. Doesn't mean that your feelings aren't valid. And if you use those feelings to sort through the situation, you're only going to find yourself in some other points of pain, whether it be causing pain to others because of your emotions, fears, or lack of confidence, or frustrations even, or whether it be happiness. Maybe there could be some happiness, generally not when we're using our feelings in a disagreement or a point of conflict. You have an opportunity to remove that and create a better outcome for you and the other people involved. We do teach people how to treat us. We do it every single day, unknowingly, by same thing, walking past the standard, and then we accept it, and that's the way it goes from there on in. So if you want to make a change and you want things to go better for you within your business or in your life, even bigger, it's by understanding that concept. We teach people how to treat us every single moment of every single day.
Love it, Coxie. Shall I give a plug for a bunch of people who are doing a better job of this on a daily basis?
Go on, do it.
Actual fact, it's you, listeners. It's you listening to this podcast, and we know that many of you have listened for a long period of time. To those of you who have just recently found the show, welcome to the community. Welcome to a different way of being a trade business owner, or a tradie, or a tradie wife, or a tradie supporter, whatever role you see yourself in at the moment. Welcome to a different way of being. Now, if you want to hang out with more of the people that are listening to this podcast, and some of the people who have put some of their own skin in the game and have been willing to actually take out their well, it's not really your wallet anymore because there's nothing in those, but take out their debit card or their checkbook and actually back themselves to live some of this change by joining the Tradiepreneur program. You can actually come and hang out with them and a whole bunch of our other listeners and followers and supporters in our free private Facebook group. So you can find that on Facebook. It's really hard to find. It's go to groups and type in Tradies in Business. And you can apply to join that group if you're not already there. If you are in the group, let us know if this episode hit the spot for you at all. Just go drop a post in there. We love to hear from our listeners. But join the group and start hanging out with people who will be willing to raise you up in order for everybody to actually benefit, rather than a lot of groups that I've been in over the years where it's a sniper rifle fest. Everyone's out to whack someone else to make themselves feel better. So if you want to join a positive group that's going to help you choose your responses more so than just react emotionally, go join the private Facebook group. And Coxie, I think you should have the final word in today's episode.
Thanks for throwing me under the bus, Warwick. I'm sitting here nodding, thinking, geez, you're wrapping this up nicely today. It's been a lovely episode.
I was hearing the sound of my own voice.
Thanks for listening, and then you're going to under the bus. I've got to have the last insightful word. Be kind, people. Just be kind. It's so much easier to be kind than it is to be disparaging. Don't be lazy. Don't play into the fear. Find your own confidence. Play into that instead. Raise others up. Really simple.
You've been listening to the Tradies in Business podcast with Warwick Bidwell and Nicole Cox. Find out more about today's guest, tools for your trade business, and other cool stuff at tradiesinbusiness.com.au.